Hello friends and welcome back to the channel. I'm Nick and this is MSFS Flight Plans, a place that is dedicated to making sure you never run out of things to do in the sim as we fly around the world looking for the coolest, best looking, most interesting places we can possibly find to fly over. Today we got a member request over Cape Town, South Africa, and the member is actually from South Africa, which is very cool. First that I know about of anyone from that area, so that's very interesting, and thank you and welcome to the channel. And this area is not only rich in history, but looks absolutely phenomenal in the sim, even without any add-ons. But I do have a payware add-on pack installed, and that is the Cape Town pack from Orbix, which I've had for several months. I got it on sale from the Orbix website not long ago, but I just noticed today that part of the Black Friday sale in the in-sim marketplace, it's on sale for $7.49. And the plane I selected for us is the Ryan Navion B by Hangar Studios, which is also on sale. That one's in Sim Market if you want to pick up a little twofer with a little early Christmas cash. And Ryan built around 1,200 of these from 1947 to 51 to satisfy the thirst for all those pilots returning from World War II. And if you had a little spare cash after pumping out all those kids, you could pick one up for around $6,000. And what's interesting about that is I was looking into the history of this plane. There was another company that was originally building them before Ryan, but it was costing them around $9,000 to build them. And they're originally selling them for even less than $6,000. So I don't know how the economics of that worked out, but apparently people were buying them up. And if you're in the market for one today, I found a few that are listed in the $75,000 to $100,000 range. So if you like the way it looks, like I do, and if you like the way it flies, like I do, pick yourself up one if you got that kind of cash. All right, let's get everything fired up here. And we got to give this a little bit of pre-priming with a pump till it peaks out. Then we just shut it off, pull the throttle back a bit. Make sure our parking brake's on so I don't drive off this cliff like I did last time. And we'll get, let's turn the fuel on. That's very important. And look who's with us. Chet, back again, in the house. Yep, so glad to see him. Anytime he can join us for a flight, I am just beside myself. All right, we'll let our GPS get cooked up here, and then we'll be on our way. This is the live weather setting. As you can see, not a cloud in the sky. There is some back there by Cape Town. I'm hoping it's not butting up against the other side of Table Mountain over there, but we'll see, I guess, once we get over there. All right, get that going. And we have a little bit of a wind, about an 8-knot headwind once we get on our runway, so that's not too bad. And our initial altitude will be 2,500 feet, so we'll go ahead and get that set up. And I think everything else is good. Let's get our transponder turned on. All right. I'm liking the way this looks. And there's a little iPad you can use that'll turn on some tip tanks, and you can put all the outside accessories and all that kind of stuff on it. I got everything turned off in advance, and I took the tip tanks off just because we're sightseeing, and I didn't want it to obstruct anything out here. All right. Let's do this. Parking brake off. This plane is also very, very easy on your computer. I've got the graphics turned up way, way high, and the only issues I saw is when we were turning around on the ground here. You know how that happens sometimes if you turn around too quickly. So I'll try not to move my head. We'll turn really slowly. But other than that, everything's going to look great. If you go to flightsim.to, there's lots of freeware packs for Cape Town as well, but none of them, I tried them in different combinations, put them all in, took them all out, put one or two in. They did not play nice with the Orbix pack. So they may look fine on their own, but if you do get the Orbix pack, don't use any of the freeware stuff or it'll jack up a lot of different stuff. The scenery looked really bad. All the mountains are melting. I don't know how it... And one of them even says it's a supplement to the Orbix pack, but that one was messing it up too. So just go with the Orbix pack if you get it. This plane has a lot of power. It rotates at 65 knots, and it will be there within just seconds once we get going. And they said you only need 400 feet of runway to take off, and it can land in less than 900, which is pretty much stall status, although it certainly doesn't look like a plane like that. But it can do it. All right, we're getting any stuttering? A little bit. That's the last we'll see of that. All right, once we get up over 500 feet or so, we'll kick the autopilot on, and I'll start telling you about all of the amazing stuff down here. All right, landing lights on. Everything else looks good. One notch of flaps. And away we'll go. So that is Table Mountain out there, and the body of water right off the coast of Cape Town where the port is called Table Bay. But before we even get to any of that stuff, I'm going to tell you about this island that we're taking off from, because like everything else around here, there is a lot of history. All right, gears up. And flaps up. And let's go ahead and pull our RPMs back a little bit, keep those in the green zone, and we can throttle back some too. This thing has plenty of power. If you like this flight plan, as always, the link for it will be available in the video description. You can pull it right into a little NavMap and then pull it from there into the sim. And you can take it just like we're flying it. And I drew it out several times to try to get the best angles for everything, so it's a pretty good route. Alright, navigation on. Vertical speed. Alright, we're in good shape. Let's go ahead and kick the vertical speed down to 500 feet a minute. And let me just make sure it turns at this first waypoint, because I was having a little bit of an issue with that before. And I also got an add-on pack that I didn't even know about that I saw as I was skimming around the in-sim marketplace, and that is supposed to take care of all of the ports and harbors that have the ships around the world, that have the ships sunk into the water. Okay, we missed our first waypoint, so I'm just going to get turned around here and see if we can pick it up on the other side. It did that last time too, and I'm not sure why. But that shouldn't be a problem. We'll just get ourselves turned around here. Look how great that looks. That's just a little taste to wet your whistle, what we've got in store. So this area is notorious for very, very foul weather, particularly in the winter months. Lots and lots of shipwrecks. And this island that we took off from is called Robben Island. And it was first discovered by the Dutch in the late 1400s. Alright, let me try our autopilot again. I'm going to actually click it down on this thing instead of using my external hardware. Autopilot on. Nav on. Okay, now it's getting us on track. The runway that we took off from does not exist today. I'm not sure when it was pulled down, but it's not there now. You can select it, of course, in the sim and in little NavMap. Alright, it's just getting us back on track. We're in good shape. But it derives its name, which is R-O-B-B-E-N, from the Dutch word for seals. And its initial use was for a bunch of herds of sheep, because they wanted to protect them from all the predators that were out on the mainland. And by the end of the 17th century, it was being used to incarcerate political prisoners. And it retained that use up until just a few decades ago. And the only way to get out here today, if you want to, since that runway's not there anymore, is by ferry. And you'll actually see the little ferry parked out here behind our pillar once we come around. In the 1800s, after being captured by the British, it was used as a whaling station and then a leper colony. And by the end of the 1800s, they were admitting hundreds of people afflicted with that disease annually. And initially they could leave if they wanted to when they got out here, but then they passed a law of some kind that prevented them from leaving. But vastly surpassing all other historical footnotes about this place, it held some of the most significant of all South African prisoners during the 20th century. And Nelson Mandela, here's the prison that they were in right here. Nelson Mandela spent 18 of his 27 years behind bars on Robben Island before being released and subsequently becoming the first black president of South Africa in 1994. And it's worth noting that 2 other former inmates have also been elected president since the turn of the millennium. And once the Brits came out here, they put a couple of naval guns out here and a radar station, and from the satellite map, if you zoom in real close, you can see they got a couple of cannon batteries out here, and then just like one cannon here, and then another one here. I think they were 9-inch guns that they put out here. But you can't see them really in the sim. The only ones that have any concrete around them are out here somewhere, but I couldn't spot those before either. And on the southern end of the island, we'll try to see if we can spot it. There's an old lighthouse called the Robben Island Light, and that was built in 1865 to keep ships well away from the area, which is apparently extremely dangerous due to some large submerged rocks. In fact, before they built the light, the Dutch were, in the 1600s, the Dutch would build huge bonfires out here just to let ships know they need to stay well away from the island. And I read that at least 31 ships are currently known to have wrecked off the coast of this place. 17 of them went down in the 20th century. And on the satellite map, you can actually see some of the hulls just sticking out around the shoreline. Same with this area down here. Lots and lots of shipwrecks out here. Alright, can we see the lighthouse? It would be somewhere in this vicinity. We'll see when we cruise over there. It may just be too small. Alright, well, we've got a few miles before we get to Cape Town. I'll give you a quick bit of history about it because we aren't going to have too many other opportunities for sidebars once we hit the mainland. Alright, I'm going to pull things back a little bit. We'll go with 20 on the throttle there, and about 22 on our RPMs. Alright, everything else is looking good. So today, this is the second largest city in South Africa after Johannesburg, but it is the oldest city in the country, and where their parliament is. And archaeologists say humans have been living down here for at least 12,000 years, utilizing the caves of Table Mountain up ahead of us for primitive shelters. And despite the Dutch being the first to mention anything about Robben Island back there behind us, the Portuguese were the first to establish a settlement and a port at Cape Town, and they started that in the 1500s. And the main purpose of the town was a provisioning stopover for trips down to the Indies, where captains would trade tobacco and metals with the local clans in exchange for food. But in 1652, the Dutch East Indian Company got in on the action and started building up their own facilities, including a fort called the Castle of Good Hope, which is the oldest building in all of South Africa, and we'll see that once we come over there, so of course we'll check that out. And you'd think the Portuguese wouldn't have been cool with the Dutch moving in on their turf, but maybe they were just so happy to have survived the trip down here that they enjoyed having some other human company. Alright, we need to come up a little bit higher to get over that little ridge ahead of us there. And as far as I could tell, that fort never saw battles of any kind, despite this whole area being taken over by the British in 1795. And leading up to the apartheid laws of the mid-1900s, Cape Town was one of the most racially integrated cities in the country. But sadly, it became one of the most segregated after all that happened. They said they moved about 60,000 people out of the downtown area and then destroyed all their houses so that the whites could move in. And though far from being ancient history, today residents of the city are once again enjoying a more civil coexistence. Alright, I just need to make sure that thing's going to stop at 2,500. So we're going to see a little lighthouse right there. This is called Green Point here. And right there, you'll see it better when we come over it. There's a little red and white base to it. There's a little lighthouse called the Green Point Light, and that was built in 1824. And it's the oldest operational lighthouse in South Africa. And this first ridge right behind that there is called Signal Hill, which used to have a flag station that would let ships know about the weather conditions in the port before they pulled in. And it's also home of the Noon Gun, which is located at a place called Lion Battery, which we might see better when we come around the other side of it right down here. And that's actually two big smooth-bore cannons that were built in 1794. And they're fired every day to mark high noon, and are the oldest guns in the world which still see daily use, which is pretty interesting. And outside of being a cherished tradition for the city, they once served the vital purpose of helping ships synchronize their onboard clocks that were down there in the port. But look at that, the landscape looks wonderful. All these buildings look great. Really good. Yeah, when I had the freeware add-on packs installed, there was no texture to this mountain. It was just a big melting mess coming off the side of it here. So I don't know what was going on with that. Once I took them out and just left the Orbix pack, it was fine again. And right up here, we're going to see in just a second a place called De Waal Park. And that was opened in 1895. It's the city's first and largest park. This is it right here. And these two pond-looking things were the original freshwater reservoirs for drinking water for the city. And I'll tell you more about their water situation in just a little bit. And on this side of it, which we'll see better when we turn, there's another longer park here, which I could not find the name of because there was so much other stuff around it. But their Parliament building is right down here, and they've got a huge museum right down here. Looks like a little cathedral right there. Look at that. Looks fantastic. And there's their fort. We're going to get a better look at that. And here's one of their community centers they've got here. Well, they call it a community center. That's actually a convention center, even though it's called the Cape Town Community Center. And they've got another big community center, or convention center down by the water. We're not going to hit that mountain. The original water line for the city came right up to the edge of this fort here. And there was another place right down here which doesn't exist anymore called Amsterdam Battery. And none of these places ever saw any battling as far as I could tell. So the water line kind of went around here, wrapped up this way, and all that's left of Amsterdam Battery now is the back retaining wall from it. And they built a skate park in the middle of it now. Look at that port. Look at these railroad tracks. Amazing. Looks fantastic. And I think they still, even though you can tour this now, I think they have some government offices or something like that in there. And can we spot the other convention center? I think this is it right down here. Yeah. And now the beautiful port of Cape Town. As we've already mentioned, the Portuguese were the first to get out here, but the Dutch really started building it up in the mid-1600s. And though I'm sure it was a huge relief for vessels to actually survive the journey down here, getting into the port was another matter entirely. There were so many losses that they eventually shut it down completely during the winter months. Look at that. Everything's elevated down here. That's a little bit flat, but all this stuff is up in the air. Yeah, all their containers are up in the air. Got a little cruise ship going out there. If you bring your chopper out here, you can land on the little helipad there. Amazing. During one particularly nasty storm in 1858, 30 ships wrecked in the bay, causing a massive loss of life and leading to the renowned underwriter Lloyd's of London to decline any claims from any ship that tried to sail into this harbor during the winter months. They said, don't even think about it. And they've got their own big Ferris wheel down here, as all the big cities seem to be adding these days. There's another little helipad. And it's kind of hard to spot from this side. We're looking sideways at it now. I think this is it right here. When we come around, we'll see if we can spot it. And this area here is used by all their helicopter tours. They'll take off and land from that area, though I didn't see any choppers sitting down there. And this is DHL Stadium here, which was built around 2009, and that replaced Green Point Stadium, which is right on the other side of it, which we'll probably see when we tip our wing here. But they left the old stadium there. That was it right there. We'll probably get a better look at that lighthouse, too. Let's see. And what's crazy about this place, you're going to see a high school in a minute that is on a, once again, really prime piece of real estate. And they put a huge golf course right down here by the water. I think it's a public golf course. Like, man, some realtors, developers could make a lot of money if they tear that thing down. There's that little lighthouse. See it right on there? That's the Green Point light. And this is called Lion's Head, and in real life, it's a lot more stratified than that, and there was even a single freeware add-on for that, but it was not, again, working well with the Orbix pack, so we just left it as is. Kind of looks like a nipple now, doesn't it? And right down here along the front of it, you're not going to be able to see it in the sim, but I'll show you on the satellite map at the end. There's a place called the Iron Man House, which was used in the movie Iron Man 3 as Tony Stark's residence, and when I show you at the end, you'll definitely recognize it if you've seen that movie. Really cool. And I can imagine that the price for a place to live down here is probably pretty steep. But look at all this stuff. Everything looks just wonderful. Alright, this high school is going to be right out here on top of this little point. And that thing was built in 1969, and it's a public high school. But they do have to pay some kind of fee each year to go there, but it was nominal. I think it was like, I couldn't convert it to US dollars, but they said it was 600 of whatever the local currency is, even though it's a public school. And it looked like everyone was wearing uniforms, so maybe that's what it pays for. Look at that. And they got another field of some kind right down there. Alright, we got to get up to 3,500 feet now to get over the top of Table Mountain, so let's dial that in. And we'll go ahead and start climbing. Look at that. Getting a little popping around the shoreline there. Nothing out of control. And you see this little thing right up here? We're going to get a good look at it here in a second. There's a little building up on the top of that ledge. And that thing is a cable car station. In the late 1800s, the locals, I guess, had started talking about building a railway up to the top of the mountain. But as you can imagine, the cost was astronomical. So they decided to build this aerial cableway instead, which opened in 1929 and is still in operation today. And it runs right down. You can just barely see it there. That's where it ends, right down there. So it runs down this side of the mountain. And I was trying to see if they had any little animated cable cars running through there, but didn't see anything like that. Alright, as we come up over the top of the mountain here, we're going to see a couple of big ponds, and none of those are natural. Up until the late 1800s, everyone in town was dependent upon one little freshwater stream for drinking water, and they stored it in those little ponds back in DeWalt Park that I showed you. But as the city grew, they knew they'd better figure something else out, so they started damming up the streams up here in 1897, creating all of these big reservoirs we see today. And when they started building the dams, everyone was literally carting all the materials up here by foot and horses, which was a big part of the decision to build the cable cars, and they used those to haul supplies up for the later dams. Alright, we can stop climbing. Look at the texturing here. Unbelievable. And if you feel like taking a little more time to do it, you could spot all 5 of the dams that created these up here. If you fly, there's one of them right there, and there's another one there. So they've all got dams, and I don't know where was the water flowing from up here? I mean, is it all just rainwater they caught? Look at that. Looks incredible. All right, let me slow down because we're about to come down again right when we peek out here. So let's get going down. So we're going to take a little detour over a point called Souther Peak. And there have been several shipwrecks out here, some of which can still be seen on the satellite maps. But there's a cool bit of history about this location. I wanted to share that with you guys. And once again, I had to dig into some travel blogs to figure this one out. We'll see a little patch of dirt up here. In fact, that's it right there. That's the spot right there on the other side of our window divider. And it was called Rocket Road in Google, so of course I had to see what that was all about. And according to the blogger, a British cargo steamer called the Maori ran aground on the rocks just off the coast up here in 1909 during a storm that was so fierce that they couldn't get anyone out there to collect the crew. So during the ensuing 40-hour rescue attempt, they started firing rockets to the ship from this location over here. And they attached little bundles of food and water and stuff to it, and ultimately they shot a rope over there, which is how they managed to save just 23 of the original crew of 55. And a few years later, they built a little storehouse down there to store more rockets, just in case they had to use similar tactics again for future rescues. All right, we'll go ahead and stop descending here. I bet you'd love that job, wouldn't you? Shooting the rockets out there. But they use it for geocaching now, which was the blog that I found it on. So on the satellite map at the end, I'll show you there's a big ship that's run aground out here that's all rusted out. And over here, there's a big, like, industrial crane that was on a barge. You can't see it in the sim, but it got, I guess, just stuck on the rocks, and they've left it there now. And those two wrecks are from 1986 and 94. So it appears even modern equipment is not enough to keep folks from running aground out here. Alright, stretching out this way to the south from here is the infamous Cape of Good Hope. And until this flight, I was under the impression that that was the southernmost point in Africa. And in reality, Cape Agulhas, about 90 miles southeast of us, claims that distinction, stretching about 30 miles further south than the Cape of Good Hope. Yep, we got a little stretching down there by the water. But it's getting better. Why? I mean, if it can get better when you're on top of it, why can it not be better when you're a little farther away? It is what it is. So the original name of this peninsula was Cape of Storms, for obvious reasons, but that must have been bad for marketing, so they ultimately decided to rename it the Cape of Good Hope. So there you go. And it's kind of interesting how the vegetation changes out here. I mean, it's really treed up over here, and then out here it looks a lot drier. So that's odd. I wonder if it has to do with the weather patterns or something. All right, this next little inlet here is called Hout Bay, and this was the area where the artifacts of the first human inhabitants were discovered. And I can understand why Stone Age people would want to set up shop down here, because it's easily the most sheltered spot in the area if you want to be near the coastline. And the Dutch were the first Europeans to move down here, and they did that because they needed timber for their shipworks up in Cape Town, but there were no trees up there. But apparently in this valley out here, there were plenty of them. So I guess they would just cut it down from the forest here, and then haul it down to the coastline and sail it a few miles back up to Cape Town. And in the late 1700s, the Dutch built a little fort on each side of the inlet. There's one here called West Fort, and then this is East Fort over here. And there's not much left of it today, but you can see they got a little cannon emplacement over on this one. I think they may have a few cannons on the coastline down here, but you really can't see them from the sim. All right, we got to cruise over this next ridge, so let's make sure we can do that safely. And as we're going to cut right over this little notch right here. And as we do that, this is called Constantiaberg Mountain right here. And on top of it, we'll see a giant 100-meter radio mast that was built in the 60s for radio and television. We'll get a nice look at Hout Bay here once we do our turn. And they've also got a weather radar up there now, which we'll also be able to see as we pass by. And apparently that's a big hiking spot. All throughout Table Mountain, there's bike paths and hiking trails. But other than a cable car station, not much else up there as far as structures go. Look at that. Alright, so that doesn't look that much better than it did before. That's what I wanted to see, although all those boats were sunk into the water before, so I guess it helped it out a little bit. But that's not incredible. But better than in the water, I guess. Alright, we'll take a look at the mast. You can just see it sticking up there. And we'll check out the little weather radar too. And then we're going to start coming down. This area over here is called False Bay. And if you find the center of it right around here and then head directly north about 5 miles, you'll see where Cape Town International Airport is. We're not going to get a good look at that because we have to turn back north to get to our destination airport. There's a little weather radar. See it up there? I'm trying to point to it. Oh, we're getting some wind over these mountains. To be expected. We're just going to clear it. Let's see how that weather radar looks. That's behind a tree. But the antennas look nice, don't they? All right, let's get back down to 2,500 feet. So False Bay was called that because early sailors returning from the east would often confuse it for Table Bay, which is the one out where the port of Cape Town is located. And that would have been a perilous mistake if you made it, because apparently it gets really shallow out there along the coastline. And South Africa's biggest naval station, you can't see it from here, but it's right down in this area, right here. I did not fly over that before, so I don't know how it looks in the sim, but you can definitely spot it on the satellite map. And since this is not the United States, apparently the only country on Earth without a horse track in every single city, we've got a nice one of those to check out up ahead. And this is going to be the first one I've seen where the track itself is all grass. It's not dirt, where the horses run, which was interesting. This is going to be it right up here. And there's the airport right there. But we're going to come right around this thing and head that way. But this place is called Kenilworth Racecourse, and it's not just a horse track. There's a conservation area right in the middle of it that's known as the best preserved patch of Cape Flats and Finbows in the world. And I had no idea what Finbows were, so I had to check that out. All right, let's level out again real quick, and I'll tell you all about Finbows. Apparently it's a very rare ecosystem where a certain type of shrub grows. So it's describing what the habitat is, a Finbow. I might name my next pet that. And according to Wikipedia, there are 20 different species of critically endangered plants growing in that tiny little spot right in the middle of this place. Right in the middle of a horse track. Go figure. But look at that. It's all grass. And it's not just a big oval. It's almost like they got a drag strip for the horses. They got one going out this way and then one coming over this way too. Which is pretty wild. Again, scenery looks amazing. What a beautiful part of the world. Thank you for the recommendation. Okay, once we turn north, we're only going to be 6 miles out from our destination, so we'll have to spot all of our remaining landmarks from a distance, but they're pretty big, so we should be able to see most of them. Let's get a good look at this race course while we're here. I mean, you'd think they'd be able to, if it was really that much of a protected area, they'd set aside a little something else for it. I mean, there's not a lot growing down there. Okay, so let's see what we got here. I gotta look for the stuff sticking up in the air, that's how I know it. Okay, this first one right here is called Athlone Stadium, home of the Cape Town Spurs Football Club. And I don't know if that's rendered flat or not, but it kind of looks flat here, but maybe it just has some low elevation. And then off in the distance, ahead of that, right here, is the Athlone Power Station, which was closed in the early 2000s. And that was a coal-fired place, which on the satellite map looked nice and rusty, so it probably looks pretty cool if you can get a close-up look at it. And then down here, this is the suburb of Newbury, and this is their big rugby stadium, and then they got a cricket stadium down here, and then a huge brewery right over here. And this is the University of Cape Town campus right over there. And originally that was called the South African College when it was established in 1829, and it made the rank of university in 1918, although I'm not sure what qualifies something for that. But it's not only the oldest university in South Africa, but also the oldest in sub-Saharan Africa. And there's our runway right ahead of us. And right over here, we won't get a good look at it, but this is where their headquarters for the Astronomical Society is for South Africa. And they got a bunch of big telescopes and stuff down there. And being a bit of an amateur astronomer myself, I can tell you that that is probably the absolute worst spot to stick a telescope. So I had to look into that to figure what the heck they would do that for. And apparently, that place has been around for a while. They set that up in 200 years ago, so maybe the city lights weren't as bad. But I mean, you got Table Mountain right there, which would be a great telescope spot. But I read their big telescopes these days are about 150 miles to the northeast, and they got a pretty big array of more modern stuff out there. So I think they just use it for kind of show and tell stuff these days. All right, let's get all set up here. This place is called Isterplaat Air Base, which is derived from a Dutch term meaning iron place. And for a while it was a civil aviation airport, and now the South African Air Force uses it for maritime patrols. But I've got clearance to land there. Jet knows somebody. Man, you're sitting way back. What are you doing way back there? Making me a little nervous. Alright, we're a little high, so we'll come down some. And that is the campus, that big building right there, that's the campus for Old Mutual, which is an insurance company. And it's pretty substantial. I noticed that as we were coming in because it was so huge. Alright, flaps down. And man, once you cut the throttle for this thing, it just stops. So you got to keep a little bit of throttle coming into this. We got a little crosswind here. We got a little crosswind coming from behind us. Alright, full RPMs. Full mixture. And once we get down, we'll just pull over to the side, take a look at the little nav map, and I'll show you all the stuff on the satellite map that we couldn't see while we were flying around. A little bit bumpy coming in here. It's alright, we got it. We got it. Watch how quick this thing just slams to a stop once I cut the throttle. And cut it. Just like that. Alright. Flaps up. Boy, that tailwind is kind of pushing the vertical stabilizer on. Alright, we're going to come over this little taxiway over here, so we'll pull over here. At least get off the runway. And we'll see if we can find a little spot to park. Not by the fuel truck. Well, maybe by the fuel truck. Yeah, there was no add-on for this place. There were a couple of freeware and payware available for the big airport, the international airport. So if you're flying around here a lot, one, be sure to get the Orbix pack, and if you really, really think you're going to be out here, you can pick up some stuff for the big airport too. Oh, we got a little guy waiting for us. Well, let's just not leave him hanging. We'll go see him. All right, brother, I see you. Is that the guy you know? All right, here we go. All right. Got you. I got you. All right, let's put the parking brake on, and we'll shut it off. Get everything turned off. Okay, here comes a little nav map. All right, so if you're not familiar with the continent of Africa, we are at the very southern end of it. And South Africa is actually a huge country. It stretches way up here into this area. And if you have seen some of our previous flights, you may recall that the Vettervert Formation, the largest meteorite impact crater in the world, is somewhere out in this vicinity over here. And it's so big that probably wouldn't even make sense to fly over it because you wouldn't be able to see it unless you were way, way up in the air. Hey, maybe that's another good flight for the B-2. But here's where Cape Town is, and here's where we left from, Robben Island. And there's the prison system, and here is where some of the batteries are. You can see why we wouldn't be able to see those flying over it. They were back behind the trees. And then here's the gun. You can see it's got the barrel sticking out from it. See that thing there? Look at that. It's got like an encasement around it. And then they got another one down here. There's the other one. And then there was the radar station was. We could not see that lighthouse, and that looks pretty big too. That's too bad that wasn't visible. So that was the prison. And if watch, I'll turn the runways off, and you'll see what it looks like here now. Is he gonna turn them off? No, gonna leave it there. Well, before I click that, and the runway went away. But it's just a big. If you look on the Google Maps, it's just a big patch of grass. You can tell where the runways were, but not anymore. All right, so we came down here, and here's Green Point. There's the little lighthouse that we spotted over there. There's the big stadiums. That was the old one. This is the one that replaced it, and they left the old one there. And here's Signal Hill, and then here is Lion Battery, where the noon guns are. Can we spot them? I don't know where exactly they are down there. Can't see them. And then here's DeWall Park, and there's the reservoirs they were originally using for the water out here. And then here's the bottom cable car station. So it runs from here down to here. And I couldn't even see the wires in the satellite map, and I didn't think there was anything in the sim either. But here's the other park, the name of which I could not find. And there's their big museum they have there. And there's a District 6 museum. That was the area where they moved all of the blacks out after apartheid. And this is their museum for that down here. So I think this whole area, they just moved them out, tore it all down. And here's their Parliament building over here. And then there's the Castle of Good Hope. Look how great that thing looks. It looked just like that in the sim too. And there's one of their exhibition centers, and then here's the other one over here. And here's where Amsterdam Battery is, and all that's left of it is this back wall here. But it was about this shape as well. So the water line must have run, and this was built about 100 years after this place, so it must have kind of run up here like this, I'm guessing, because that was probably also along the water line. And they just built all of this out here since then. And you can kind of tell, I mean, they've got a rocky shoreline starting down in this area. So I'm wondering just how much of this they built out. This looks like a more artificial because they got sandy beaches out there. But there was the port, which looked amazing. There's where their little heliport is. And the Ferris wheel, which you really can't see here because we're looking right down on top of it, is somewhere in this area right here, if you want to try to spot that again. All right, so we came out, hit, let me show you there's lines. You can tell, see it's a little bit more stratified if you look at it, and it's a little bit pointier than it was in the sim, less nipple looking. Here's the house where Tony Stark lived. Look at that. See that thing? You remember it from the movie? And if you look at it from down here, they got some great pictures of it. It's got these two big, these are all windows going around here, and they got this big pool in the middle. Totally awesome. There's that high school. Look at that. Imagine that being your school. Insane. What's crazy is how many of those that we've seen around the world. I've never had a high school like that. Mine was in the middle of a huge cow pasture. All right, so here's where all the reservoirs are, and here's all the dams that they use to block those things up. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. Here's the 5th dam that they've got over here. And man, the texture on those mountains just looked amazing. So good. All right, we cruised down here to Rocket Road, and here's where that is right here. And it's not actually called Rocket Road. The vlogger was very sure to mention that that's not the real name of the road, and I couldn't spot the little cabin they built out there. Chet will be very disappointed. Maybe that's it right there. But here's one of the wrecks. This was called the Harvest Capella, and you can see it a little bit better in the Google Maps if you want to check it out. But that's what's left of that one. And then here's the big crane. Look at this thing. That was called the Boss 400. Look at that. I mean, you'd think someone would be able to haul that away, but yeah, good for tourists, I guess. All these hiking trails around out here. They said it's good to see it from the top of this mountain. And then here's Hout Bay out here, and here's the West Fort. And these little things here, these are all the cannons. Obviously, you wouldn't be able to see those in the sim. There's the harbor, which may or may not have looked better after that add-on. I think I paid like $15 for that too. I'm a little bit disappointed right now, but we'll see how the rest of the world looks. And then here's the East Fort, and they got some cannons over here as well. And they've got some ruins over here, and this is called the Forester's Cabin. So that must have been from back in the day when they were cutting all the trees down out here. And then here's where that radio mast was. And you can even see it there, and there's our little weather radar. Man, that was a beautiful little flyover of that mountain. And here's False Bay out here, and let me kind of show you the proximity to the airport. So you can see right about the midpoint, that's about 5 miles from there to there. And then right down here is the big naval station for South Africa, if you want to fly down there and check that out. But based on that last port we saw, I'm guessing that's probably not all that impressive. But that's it. And then here is the Kenilworth Racecourse, which looked just like that in the sim. I would love to know what this big long stretch is. Member from South Africa, let me know what this thing's all about. The curiosity is just killing me. Why do they got a drag strip in there? And then here we have the brewery, of course, which they do tours at. So if you're wanting to get a few sips of beer for free, you could probably go through there. I'm sure there's probably a fee for the tour. There's the cricket stadium and the huge rugby stadium. That looked really good, but we just couldn't get too close to it. And out here is the university campus. And they got about 30,000 students there, but they had a couple other buildings spread around the city. So I don't know if this is obviously the main campus, but they have some other buildings around the city too. And they had a couple things out here. We didn't fly over this way, so we didn't get to check it out. But there's a place called the King's Blockhouse and the Queen's Blockhouse. And there's a little bit of a ruin there. So you can see it there. And there's also a place called the Old Cannon up here, which is really, really tiny. So I had to look into that. And apparently it was used to signal from over here before they had any kind of electronic communications. They would use signaling to get a message from here over to down here to False Bay. So I don't know if they used fires or flares or flags or what, but that's what those were for when they built them. And then here's Athlone Stadium, which may have been flat. From the distance that we saw it from, it looked a little bit flat. And then look at this old power station. Look how rusty that is. I bet that looks great up close. And then here's the Astronomical Observatory. And look, you can see where the telescopes are. There's one there. There's one there. Maybe another one here. But that would be a really, really bad spot to put a big telescope, especially with a huge mountain right next to you. You could just imagine what it would be like to go on the mountain, I guess, if you're looking through that. And then here's the Old Mutual campus. I just put some question marks by it because I want to figure out what the heck that was. And then we came in for our landing at Yesterplaat Air Base. And they said that Yesterplaat is actually a Dutch word that became an Afrikaans word. So it looked very similar. Both the words did, but that's the history of that place. All right, that's it. awesome flight. We've got our Norway flight coming up. Our member from Norway has sent me a flight plan, so I'm going to check that out. And I've also got a few other little short hops in mind, so we'll just see what comes down the pike. But Norway will be coming pretty soon, so stay tuned for that. Had an absolute blast as always. Can't wait to see you all again in the skies. Later.